911 emergency, what are you reporting?
911 emergency, what are you reporting?
911, what is your emergency? This is the police department. How can I help you? Do you need police, fire, or medical?
Welcome everyone to another great episode of We Speak Dispatch, because if we are speaking dispatch, it means y'all are speaking dispatch as well. And that is awesome because it is a pretty phenomenal conversation to have. So we are here today with a very special guest, but we also have our usual suspects. So we'll go around the horn and everybody, we got Doug up there, wherever he's showing up on your screen. We got Joe.
Hello, everybody.
Titans. All right. John, how's it going?
Woohoo!
Wow. And now we have Dr.
Yes.
Violet.
Wow.
Hi.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you here. So a little bit about what we know about the doctor, and then she'll have an opportunity to give us some more insight. But she's a former dispatcher, has worked in a couple different states, and was doing some doctoral studies and found some pretty phenomenal insights as it comes to wellness and the profession of dispatch. So Dr. Violet, tell us a little bit about you and what's your story?
Yeah, so I started dispatching in Florida for 2 different police departments, and I was the only person dispatching. It was, you know, one setups where there's only one person in the box. So I was kind of, I was all the roles, including walk-in complaints while I was answering 911 kind of thing. So, and then later on, I moved to Pennsylvania, and I was in a room where we dispatched for 72 jurisdictions. So it was a big switch.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got to see things from both sides of the fence, and I kind of value the smaller agencies because you know all of your people in the field. Yeah. Whereas in the bigger agency, we might have had access to more toys, but we didn't really know our officers. They were just a disembodied voice somewhere out there.
Were you the only one with 72 agencies?
No, we had 3 police dispatchers on at a time and 2 fire dispatchers, and then the rest of us answered calls, and we would switch throughout the night.
For 72 counties, that's a lot of going on there. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about going from an agency where you know the jurisdiction like the back of your hand to now being in a situation where, okay, I've got to trust that you're telling me where you really are, because there's no way that I can figure it out.
Were you the dispatcher and supervisor in Florida when you worked for that one seat place?
No, I had a supervisor, but a lot of times the supervisor wasn't there. So some of our officers were trained to answer the phones just if they wanted to pick up overtime, which they rarely wanted to be sitting there. But if they walked by and saw that I was in the weeds, they would jump over and start helping. Well, so it was good that way. We were more of a family.
Yeah.
So.
Yikes.
So at what point, because it says that you started to understand that the dispatchers had some very distinct needs for wellness. So what was that how did that come to light?
I started thinking about it actually in Florida, because I had already had my undergrad in psych, but you can't really do anything with a bachelor's in psych. And I was always interested in dispatching, so I went for it. But I realized, gosh, when you don't get your lunch break, or when you can't leave the building for your lunch break, like other people in other jobs just normally go out to lunch, it really starts to weigh heavy on you. And when you get a tough call and you immediately have to answer another one, same thing. There's no downtime to process anything. So just comparing different management styles, and when I got to Pennsylvania, different coworker interaction styles, and all the things that go with the job, the good, bad, and the ugly. I thought to myself, there's really got to be like better ways to do things, not even just like helping people deal with trauma after it happened and they're off the clock, but stuff that we could be doing immediately or setting up differently on site so that right away somebody could breathe.
Right.
Wow.
It's such a unique environment. So what what were some of the takeaways that you saw or things that people can implement? Because one of the things that we like, and We Speak Dispatch is, the goal is for someone to, maybe if they got a break and they're listening to the podcast as they walk around or something like that, that they can go back and implement some of these things. What did you find was the biggest simple way that people could implement some of these things before we get into some of the more difficult ones?
The simplest things were, I would say at least half of the people that participated in my study advocated for a quiet room, which is kind of ironic because, you can't say the Q word while you're working, but they wanted a place to be able to just decompress that wasn't where everybody was talking, and just have something with low lights and maybe some spa music, or like just sit there in a recliner that it's like a special chair that nobody bothers you while you're in there.
Right.
And I think almost every center could implement that. And that's kind of how my wheels started spinning. Like, what else could we do? Another thing that people asked for all the time was like, well, why can't we have a gym? Why can't they just build us a walking path outside? If we can't leave, at least we can get out of the building and walk around on our.
Well, depending on where you're working. I mean, when I worked in downtown LA, you did not want to go outside and walk around.
No.
Yeah, but when you worked there, did you have like I don't know what that's set up like? I mean, I'm in the LA area, but is it like an enclosed area, or?
Yeah, it was a huge comm center, but it was in a really bad part of town, and really, it was dangerous to be outside smoking or just having a break or whatever. And we did not have, like you said, a quiet room. It was the most thing. I mean, it was like you just keep answering calls like crazy. It was a lot. I wish you would have had that. I think that would have really helped a lot of people's attitudes. So did you ever find yourself psychoanalyzing your coworkers, like looking at them going, mommy issues?
Actually, yes, that's the danger of taking psych, right?
That
and it got
person
to a
needs
point,
more wellness.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can we issue Xanax at that place? What about, I just taught a class in Memphis, and one of the issues we were talking about is new technology coming. And we were talking about how we're going to get video and pictures and everything else, live action for the dispatchers to look right at these screens.
Right.
Talking about building some resiliency in your people to say, hey, this is going to change the way we do things. I can deal with it on the phone, but damn, seeing it, I mean, seeing something terrible happen right in front of you, that's going to really change things. So what do you think about that kind of resiliency?
Yeah. And the one thing I think that people don't consider about what dispatchers have to go through is that we are getting people at the very worst of their moment of emotion. Sometimes if an officer drives up on something, they are too, but always we are. And if you're going to also add a visual to that, that's going to be a whole new level of stress.
I mean, it's a lot of people aren't ready for it. I mean, a lot of people are just kind of thinking, it'll come eventually. It's already in a bunch of comm centers right now. I mean, I'm going to Georgia in next month, and one of the centers that's going to be down there is the one testing this thing. And I'm like, I want to talk to people about how do you build for that? I didn't even want to deal with like a suicide on the phone, let alone see somebody do it. It's like,
I know.
I think the dispatcher has a little bit of control over that when they turn it on. And I think its intent is to be used more for location services than necessarily seeing all the traumatic stuff. I'm not real familiar with it, but that's a little bit of my understanding. Leslie or John, do either one of you know more about that video program?
Well, the only thing that I can say is, and I've been in some classes where, and it's a pretty strong statement, and we all know that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And, how many calls have we taken over the course of our career where someone is telling us something, and we know once the field responders get there that it is completely different than what is described to us. And even that in and of itself is stressful because you can hear that somebody needs help. But you can't, that information that you're providing to your responders and you want them to be safe, and that's also very stressful, is suspect at best. So yes, I agree that there is some stress that is going to come from the visual. And I do think it can be permissioned. And I think we have an opportunity to build some of those programs, but I think it's a give and take. I think some of that information and having that actionable data from the beginning is going to reduce the stress in one column. Well, maybe it goes up a little bit in the other column. I don't know, John, what do you think?
It's an element that could offer some closure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Based upon what I see and being more part of the situation. I mean, I think there are a couple companies that offer it. The big one I know you can blur the image out kind of thing, so you don't have to look at what I'll call the guts and glory.
Mm-hmm.
But
the
the good thing is,
and
the good thing with that, I mean, the biggest stressor that people have under the headset is, am I going to be seen? And the answer
a lot of people say that.
No.
And the answer typically is no.
Right.
Well, it's interesting you should bring this up, because one of the two top stressors of the call takers in my study was barriers to getting information. It wasn't like a particular call type. It was a call type where you cannot get the answers to your question, whether they're uncooperative or there's a language barrier or they can't talk, you know, and this would at least decrease that.
Right. And I think that is that give and take where, because everyone who sits in the seat is there because they came to the profession with this desire to help people. And so that barrier, that's a perfect word, when you can't get to the solution because of a variety of different reasons. I mean, that is super stressful. And then you mentioned, you know, going from call to call to call to call, your mind is still on the one that you couldn't help, but now the new one's coming in and yeah. So we've got just a few minutes, about 5 minutes left. I really want to know what can we do? Is this just a profession that we're destined to just have this hanging over our head all the time, or are there things that we can do to make a difference?
Absolutely. And that's why I ended up going in the direction I did after the study that I did. There is grant money available to get these changes, whether it's things we need to change in our buildings or things that we need to change for things we can access when we're off the clock. And so whether it's a department or whether it's a nonprofit for first responders, there's a way to access that. So that's what I do now. How would you
suggest they start? Like if I got an agency we know we've had some issues in the past with stress and very terrible things happening, how would I start? What would I do to start making us on a wellness track?
Ask the employees what they want the most. Because they need to feel like they're part of the process. And a lot of times they're not. The decisions are made by people who don't do the job.
That's what I was going to ask. But earlier in the episode, you said that 50% of the people that responded wanted a quiet room. Was there any other data that said from the agencies that have a quiet room how often they're used?
Well, you know, the people who have a quiet room gave it as an idea for how to change things. It was interesting. So I got to hear right from them that it really works for them, and they feel like they just want to be away from everybody and they feel better. Yeah. And, you know, it doesn't take the trauma away, but it gives them enough in that moment to sit back in the chair.
Right. And I bet
every single one of us. In Pennsylvania?
I didn't have it.
You didn't even, okay, in the bigger center, it didn't even, wasn't there.
Okay. Nope. I'm sure we've all had that shift where we get in the car and we're driving home and we turn off the radio. I mean, it's we just need quiet. And to have that while you're on the job, because it does give you that reset to go, okay, let me get back in there. That's interesting. So did you have a lot of people respond to this survey and give you some good information?
I had close to 200 people respond. I surveyed dispatchers up and down the state of California, from the most rural location to the biggest cities, just comparing them to see if they said the same things. And there were so many commonalities, it was crazy. But altogether, I was able to use 142 of the responses because I had to use the ones where everybody answered every question. That's just how it played out.
Now, did you pick California specifically for a reason, or?
Well, because I lived there, and because it was my doctoral, so I had to do something that was obtainable for me within a certain amount of months.
What are you doing with your results of your, stuff you've been researching? What are you doing with it? Are you making a book? Are you going to make a movie? What are you going to do with it?
I've already had a few articles published. I've had 2 in APCO with my results. They're in other places like Fire Rescue One and different magazines. So what I did was I split up things and made separate articles so that the audience could absorb for example, one magazine asked me if I would write about daycare centers, because that was an idea that a lot of
I heard that.
Like not even on that site, but say your county has like 2 daycare centers that like EMS can use, fire, police, and you know, because sometimes they're single parents too.
Oh, sure. Well, and I'm curious if, you know, you mentioned these grants and these opportunities to get some funding, that a lot of the states, you know, are going through this reclassification to get dispatchers reclassified as first responders. And I would imagine that reclassification right there is the foot in the door to start that conversation. I think that's incredibly helpful.
I think this is a good
How would you suggest dispatchers that are listening to this or watching this, how can they get a hold of some of the information you've put together and said, I've got these articles? I mean, I got down that you've got an article in APCO and stuff like that. I mean, are you willing to like give out your email and people can email you a question or? Yeah,
sure. Well, you can contact me through my website, which is 911grantwriting.com.
Oh, look at that. All right. Wow.
And you can contact me on LinkedIn, Violet Rimshaw, and whatever your question is, I'll try my best to answer it for you.
Excellent. Yeah, that was good. I was wondering how we're going to be able to get people to you that are going to listen to this going, I'd like to do something, but I don't even know where to start. So
yeah, that's great. That's excellent. Well, we are out of time, so I wanted to thank you, Dr. Violet, for being a part of this. This is a topic we could spend hours, months, years.
Yeah. And we set a timer for hours.
And so the fact that it's not just, well, this is the way I feel, but you've done the scientific research and you've come up with tangible ideas to move forward. I think that's incredibly powerful. So hopefully your email is going to be inundated with, okay, how can I do more? Because that's incredibly helpful. So
big time.
Thank you again for being a part of this. Thank you everybody for listening to We Speak Dispatch. Joe, I'm going to ask you, give us a little rundown of where we are and what we're doing.
Well, if you enjoyed Dr. Violet's episode, you can also listen to other episodes across almost any social media platform. We are also on every podcast platform you can imagine in over 36 countries, wow. 36 countries with 20,000 plus plays. So we appreciate all of you listening to us. That's what makes us keep filming more episodes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Hey, this is Jill, and you've been listening to another great episode of We Speak Dispatch, proudly sponsored by our friends at Zybex.